I have two statements here from which I'd like to read. News, where the breaking news is that Bob Hawke has died at the age of 89. He was Prime Minister from 1983 to 1991. We are expecting the Labor leader Bill Shorten to speak in Sydney shortly, but before that...
ABC Insiders host Barry Cassidy is in Melbourne. Let's cross there now. Barry, thanks for talking to us tonight. You knew Bob Hawke personally and professionally, of course. You worked with him closely while he was Prime Minister as his Chief Press Secretary between 1986 and 1991. Your thoughts tonight?
Well, it's incredibly sad, obviously, but Bob Hawke will be remembered. Well, for a start, he was the longest-serving Labor Prime Minister of all time. He was always going to have a special place in history. He was a great economic reformer. Together with Paul Keating, he did open up the economy to the world, and that has been well documented. What was he really like? John Singleton once said of Bob Hawke that he was an intellectual knockabout, and I really like that expression because I think that covers all bases. He was the sort of person who was just as easy with world leaders as he was with punters at the racetrack. It was all the same to him. And people really had the sense that they could just approach him at any time and have a chat with him.
What did you learn from him, Barry?
I tell you what most impressed me about him was that he wouldn't cop racism. He just wouldn't cop it at any level. At the very whiff of it, he'd be right onto it. You know, when he worked with the ACTU, he led the campaign against the Springboks tour over apartheid. And then when he became Prime Minister, I think it was the Choggins in 85 and 87, without telling anybody, without telling the media, just a few senior public servants, he went about organising financial sanctions against South Africa, and he got a businessman called Jim Wolverson to fly to Canada during Choggum, and he briefed him on this. He took it on. And you know, afterwards, years later, the Foreign Minister of South Africa said that was the dagger at the heart of apartheid. That's what Bob Hawke did. He just took it on. There was the time, of course, when John Howard raised the issue of not just lowering immigration, but reducing specifically Asian immigration. And people got together in his office and he said, I'm really taking this on. I'm going to go into the Parliament and challenge this. And I recall people saying to him at the time, you better be careful, you know, this could be a popular move on their part. And he just looked at them and said, well, if that's the public attitude, tell me what I need to say to change their minds. And to me, that showed genuine commitment to the fight against racism. And even today, you need that kind of commitment to arrest it.
Barry, Bill Shorten has used two words to describe him: conviction and consensus. How did he build that consensus at a time where Australia was struggling, certainly as far as the unions and business being at war with each other?
Yeah, well, right from the start, he had the economic summit. He got all sides together. He got business and unions and everybody with an interest in economic management together and came up with a prices and incomes accord that held and really it fundamentally changed the economy. But I watched him operate, and I saw how, you know, for a guy that was some people saw him as a kind of sometimes an abrasive figure. He wasn't like that at all in terms of how he negotiated. He would hear from everybody in the room and he wouldn't say anything. He would just listen. And I understand he conducted cabinet meetings that way as well. He was a very good listener. And then at the end, you know, after an hour or so, he would say, right, this is what I think. So that's the way he operated. So it was consensus, but it was also giving everybody their say.
He was remembered with such fondness by so many Australians. How do you think collectively Australia will be thinking of him tonight?
I would, you know, John Howard once said that no politician is popular forever, and he described that as one of the great ironies of politics. I think Bob Hawke disproved that. I think he grew in popularity from 1981 onwards, right up until now. Incredibly popular. And it's just because people felt that if they saw him at the football or the races or in the street, they could just say, "G'day, Bob," and feel that they weren't going to be shunned in any way. That, you know, one of the most remarkable things about him was the discipline. You know, he had a drinking problem, clearly, before he went into politics. And yet he was determined to succeed as Prime Minister, and so he didn't touch a drop, not for 8 years. And of course, had he had a drink, you would have known about it. You know, he had this great mate in Melbourne called Cole Cunningham, who owned a small bus company and played golf with him. And Cole Cunningham once said that, you know, they say that beer destroys the brain. Well, Bob Hawke disproved that, because he said he's still got his marbles when he should be a raving lunatic. And that's the sort of, that's where he was, and yet he governed successfully for 8 years, and you know, it's remarkable, really.